So, what do we do with the city of Chicago? Many of you guys live in Chicago, and you might not have, like in DeKalb, we have the wells, and we get groundwater here. Some of you might live in areas where you've got different types of water. So, I thought maybe I'd just go a little bit into what happens in the city of Chicago and some of the major groundwater issues of our region. So the city of Chicago gets their water, as we mentioned before, from the Great Lakes, and I showed you where the recharge areas were and the discharge areas were. By international treaty, you have to have in order to get any water out of the Great Lakes. The Jardine Water Purification Plant is the largest capacity water filtration plant in the world. So if you've been to Navy Pier, here's Navy Pier right here. There's a giant Ferris wheel. If you look to the north, that is the Jardine Water Purification Plant. And so it takes it from the cribs that are located along in the Great Lakes, takes it into here, treats it before it goes into the city of Chicago. So it draws water from two of the city's water cribs that are off the Lake Michigan shore, and it sends about 1 billion gallons of water per day to consumers in the north and central portions of the city. If your Chicago history, you know that the Chicago River used to flow into the Great Lakes, and then they reversed the direction of it to send that water down to the Mississippi River to pollute cities like St. Louis. Oh, well, sorry. But the reason that they reversed the direction of the Chicago River is because what was happening is that water from Chicago was going right into the Great Lakes, and that's where the cribs were, and that was coming back in and polluting the city. And so by reversing that and sending the sewage downstream, downriver, down to the Mississippi, you allowed for Chicago to be able to have a clean drinking water support from that. We've already talked a little bit about this, but this is the areas that feed the Great Lakes. So any water that lands within inside of this water ends up within inside of the Great Lakes. We do have the Chicago diversion, which is that reversal of the Chicago where we divert water and we send it downstream inside of there. And so it takes water out of this watershed and takes it out of it through that area. So, let me erase this. Click so you guys can see this better. Okay, so we've already kind of showed you some of this where we show the DeKalb County. Here we are in DeKalb. We get groundwater and stuff. Here shows the areas that all get Lake Michigan water, and then we've got some of the communities that use surface water in there. So here's DeKalb County, and this is a groundwater, what's called a potentiometric map, and this is groundwater elevations in the deep sandstone aquifer system. And so this is the St. Peter sandstone that outcrops near Oregon, Illinois. So if you drive around Oregon, Illinois, you can see some sand that outcrops over there. That's the recharge point for this aquifer that dips down below the city of Chicago. This tells you the elevations, and you can see that the water flows from high to low. So DeKalb, we are pretty good. Right over here, there's the Sandwich Fault Zone. There is a fault in the southern part of DeKalb County. And then there's the city of Joliet, which is just a large hole that it's really just sucks all the water into that city, into that area. So the city of Joliet can't get any more water out of this aquifer. They're actually thinking about doing a diversion from it. But it just shows you how much these areas are sucking down the groundwater for the communities. This is water level changes. So here, if you notice the city of Chicago right here, these are positive numbers, and this is changes over I forget how many period of time it is. But what this does is one of the reasons this has all come up is the city of Chicago and everything has stopped using any groundwater and pumping any groundwater. It uses all Lake Michigan water, and so the groundwater has rebounded and actually has come up a lot, while cities like Joliet and here is this giant area where water levels are still decreasing horribly as they're pumping a lot more from the water. So cities like Plano, Plainfield, areas like this are, because there's limited amounts of water and water changes, are looking at other sources, getting water from Great Lakes, having that piped into the area, some of the other issues. Here in DeKalb, we've got a little bit of decreasing in our aquifers, but not a lot in that area. So distribution of the deep bedrock aquifer pumpage. So this just shows you who are using it, and it's all your little suburbs. And then the rest of this is the city of Chicago. So the main areas that are using it are Will, Kendall, Kane, and McHenry counties remain heavily reliant on groundwater withdrawals from the Cambrian Ordovician sandstone aquifer. That's that St. Peter sandstone that outcrops in Oregon that I mentioned before. The sandstone aquifer in these counties, however, are largely overlain by impermeable sequences of shales and dolomites, which mostly prevent precipitation from recharging that sandy aquifers. So while it recharges out in Oregon, there is these impermeable aquitards. See, I'm starting to use some of the words that we've talked about in this class. Aquitards that are like shales and dolomites that don't let that water come in, and so it doesn't recharge in those areas. It only recharges in some of the areas. And so they're almost mining the water out in those areas. And many public water systems in the areas have started alternative water uses. For an example, Aurora now uses a mix of deep groundwater and Fox River water. So Fox River water comes in from through Wisconsin, comes downstream from there. A lot of wastewater treatment plants dispose of their effluent into that river. But we just talked about wastewater treatment plants and how that water that is through a tertiary treatment with just a little bit more treatment could actually be drinking water again. It is very clean water when it comes out of a wastewater treatment plant. During the major drought of 2011, the Fox River almost went completely dry. If it weren't for these wastewater treatment plants, like in the city of Elgin, that really fed the water into it and kept it going, and so allow for cities like Aurora to be able to mix that water. So use a little bit of surface water and some groundwater in there. Wilmington uses the Kankakee River, and Plainfield is now switching over to Lake Michigan water because I showed you that big groundwater decrease there. Let me get rid of these. And so this is just showing a cross section. So here is Illinois. So we're looking from A to A prime. So what does the geology look like if we cut a slice down from A to A prime? So this is A. So this is over here in Oregon, Illinois. And then this is the city of Chicago over here. And you guys can see Ogle County, DeKalb County, Kane, DuPage, Cook, and then Lake Michigan. And this is the St. Peter sandstone right here, where most people are getting their drinking water supplies from. If you notice, it kind of dips down at the Lake Michigan, so it's further down to get to it. It's very shallow for us to get it in DeKalb, and over here in Lee and Ogle counties, it outcrops right at the surface. And then here in DeKalb, we have it's called the Troy Valley. We get our drinking water from right here. This Troy Valley right here, where we're getting our water, goes right into there and cross-cuts this St. Peter sandstone right here and allows for recharge into that water system, so that as other towns that are located closer to the city are pumping the water out, that we're actually one of the areas that recharges it. So we have to be careful what we do here, because what we do here from our water point of view can impact cities like Chicago and other communities down gradient from it. So some ideas of what happens to that water. So this is the regional aquifer system. Here is DeKalb. As I said, that groundwater goes into, gets recharged into it. And if we follow these lines, it shows where that water will eventually end up in groundwater flow. And there's that big hole or deep groundwater dropping area where the groundwater is very deep, is in Joliet. And so a lot of the water eventually that is being recharged over here will eventually end up in Joliet. There is a groundwater divide here. You guys can see that word right here. Water that lands on this side of the groundwater divide will flow different direction, won't flow into these aquifers and cities. The last thing I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about is the TARP project, or the Big Dig project. The city of Chicago has a combined sewer and storm. And what happens is every time it rains, all of that water goes to this wastewater treatment plant. And that overwhelms the system, and so they end up disposing of raw sewage into rivers and lakes and streams when we have a lot of rain. And that's not good. You don't want to have into the Chicago River all of your sewage that isn't treated, because it's overwhelming the system. So how do we solve this? Do we tear up all of our sewers in the entire city of Chicago to separate our sewage from our stormwater? Is that what we should do? That's really expensive to do, and to do all that infrastructure. which we might actually need it. However, what they decided to do was the tunnel and reservoir plan. This is what they've decided to do in order to take care of this thing. So they have these deep tunnels that they created throughout the city, and I'll show you the maps of where they put them. So when we get too much rain, what happens is instead of all of that water going straight into the wastewater treatment plant and overwhelming the system, so we're just dumping the raw sewage into the rivers. If there is too much water, what it does is it pumps all that water into a giant reservoir. Then they can pump that water out of the reservoir into the wastewater treatment plant, then treat it and put it into a river. So this way, they are having a place to store the water and then treat it slowly into there. Stormwater generally doesn't contain a lot of things, so it's mostly water, but we don't want to be dumping into the stormwater into it. And so this was one of the ideas was, could we build a reservoir for it? Well, what the city of Chicago did was they have two different systems. They have a southern part and a northern part down here. I'm going to focus mostly on the southern one because you guys might have all seen the Thornton Quarry and gone on 8094 before you go into Indiana. You stopped at like the Lincoln Oasis and there's that area that you drive over. That's the Thornton Quarry. We'll talk a little bit about that. So what would happen is in the houses with tarp, what it would do is it had 109 miles of tunnels. Some of these are about 33 feet in diameter. And what would happen is when we had so much rain, not just from your homes, but also from all your sewage, rainwater, would go into the collective thing, and then it could go into this tarp tunnels. Some of it would go into the sewage, whatever couldn't fit into it. If it was overwhelming the sewer lines, it can then go into these tarp tunnels, be stored, and then treated later on. This is just some of the pictures of it. So here's the size of the tunnels that they built underneath the city of Chicago. Again, just reminding people that the city of Chicago has a combined sewer outfall. And so this could be just sewage that comes into here. So this outfall may discharge rainwater mixed with sewage during storms. And so they put up these signs to remind people that this may just be raw sewage if there's a lot of rain going on there. So one of the places that they built these giant reservoirs to hold on to it is the Thornton Quarry. So this is 8094. This is the Lincoln Oasis over here. You're driving down this road over here and you look to the south. This is mining operations, and so is this over here. They're mining limestone. They use it for road aggregate and other uses into there, but they mine this limestone. A couple times a year, you can actually go on a tour of it and go collect fossils. I did that one time. It was tons of fun. If you get a chance ever to do it, oh my God, you should do it. I can't believe I offered it to all the students to go with us, and I could only get one student of a class of 15 to go with me. Silly people. However, we went and looked at fossil hunting over on this side. When you're driving over on top of this, you're not actually on a bridge. You're just on the solid land. They've just mined around it. If you go to the north side, this is the north side over in here. Here's the giant tunnel in the tarp system. They sealed up all the cracks and fractures within inside of the rocks, and then the water comes in over here. This is where that hole is, right over in this area here. That water then can come in here, sit here, and then it can be pumped back out and treated. So the north side of the Thornton Quarry is now a giant reservoir to hold that water back, and the south side over here is a mining operation of the Thornton Quarry. Just so you know that. And so here's just an idea. Here's the Thornton Quarry and stuff. Then it goes into the Calumet Water Reclamation Plant. There's also some other dams and other areas that bring that water into that reclamation district that then can go into that area. And then, there's some other sanitary and shipping canals and other treatment plants within inside of the area. Here's the electric fish barrier, so we don't get the Asian carp coming into the system in there, and so that we can treat this water and go into it. So I hope you learned a few things about the city of Chicago's water. I hope you learned a little bit about DeKalb water and anything in between.